I hope you guys are having a great Monday afternoon. On today's episode of Personal Development Conversations number 6, if you are an entrepreneur who is living on a tight budget right now and you're finding it hard to find discretionary income, maybe it's because you don't have perfect credit. Maybe it's because you don't have any cash reserves. And pretty much you're living paycheck to paycheck. And while you appreciate your job, you hate it. And you have a great idea and you're looking to get started, but it seems like you may have to wait until tax season for you to have the discretionary income to invest. And, you've been doing your best to maybe borrow it from people or get a loan, and it's been difficult for you. If you've been finding it hard to find the extra cash to invest in your business, you've come to the right video. So I'm going to dive right in without further ado. And I also wanted to give a disclaimer up front. I am not a financial advisor. I'm not an accountant. I'm not a financial attorney or any of those things. If you need any professional information, look to those professionals. I'm just someone who's had an experience that you can potentially relate to and that has some information that could prove valuable to you and that could inspire you to move forward. Now, right up front, I am a parent. I have 2 child support payment that gets deducted from my check, right? I work a full-time job as well as working on my business part-time. And I also have a 12-year-old boy who stays with me, who I'm financially responsible for, and who I take care of, his medical insurance and everything as well, because he's with me. And so I understand what it is when you have a family and you have those responsibilities. Now, the good news is if you don't have any children, right, and like I said, you don't have perfect credit, you don't have a lot of cash reserves, but you have a decent paying job, but funds are still kind of tight, there's a lot of hope for you, right? Even though I'm not going to assume that I understand the other things you may be dealing with. You may be helping another family member out, or you may be taking care of some debt from your past, right? That takes a lot of your income. So I don't assume that I know your lifestyle. Like I said, this may not be an answer for you, this episode, but I'm hoping that it could shed some light and give you some ideas to work with moving forward concerning your entrepreneurial journey. And I'm going to say this right now and keep it very simple. Living below my means has absolutely transformed my life, right? Becoming more financially disciplined, prioritizing financially, budgeting, all of those things has transformed my life. Before, I owned a service-based business for 20 years as a tattoo artist. And a couple of years within that business, I was a 6-figure earner. So I had some experiences where I had a lot more cash coming in, right, than was going out at that time, but I still had horrible habits. And I'm going to explain to you what those are. Like I said, I'm going to be transparent. I was horrible with money. I was what you would call a modern day prodigal son. I was pretty much a teenager in a man's body, right? Probably not even I don't even want to say that I was a child in a man's body, because there are probably some responsible teenagers out there. I don't want to insult them. I've always had an abundance of opportunities. I've always had jobs whenever I needed to have them, right? And like I said, as a tattoo artist, I've always had clients because I genuinely did love to create. I love to design, and I had, pretty decent artwork. It was above average where I was from in Baltimore. And so I kind of stood out, right? I was able to get myself in 8 tattoo shops, right? Which at that time, especially before the tattoo reality industry, exploded, it was rare. It was rare that you would find an African American tattoo artist in a professional shop in America at that time. It still was even rare, even when the tattoo reality scene blew up. There were more African Americans, but it was still rare. We were really, really less than. You would expect to see us less than another culture within a tattoo shop. Let's just say that. But then as the years went on, a lot more African American owned tattoo shops started popping up. But I'm talking about in general. All right. I've literally worked in, white owned, primarily white owned tattoo shops as well. And I actually received my tattoo license. So that was a blessing for me. But like I said, even though I loved and was very passionate and focused and disciplined when it came to tattooing and learning it and things of that nature, I had a bunch of horrible financial habits. And those habits carried through for most of the 20 years that I tattooed. Now, at the tail end, I learned, digital advertising, prospecting, and things of that nature. And I understood the science of sales because I always was able to accumulate customers. But I really didn't understand the science of sales, how it actually worked. But I began to understand the science of it. I learned how to copyright in terms of creating messaging that converted into sales. I learned that. So it was a very, very great experience. But the best thing that happened to me is when I retired from tattooing and I got a job. I was at a space where I was at a crossroads and I had went through some spiritual turmoil. And I wasn't sure if I even wanted to move forward with my entrepreneurship, even though I just created some products that were proven in the marketplace. I was burnt out at that point, right? Spiritually depleted. And I just simply wanted to put my life back together and I wanted to fix my life. My oldest daughter was frustrated with me because I had experienced homelessness and it just was a bad situation. Like I said, I was very financially immature, financially ill, modern day prodigal son. And I put myself in situations where I became vulnerable and, I got kicked out onto the streets. Now, fortunately, I was still able to earn sales and money and things like that. So I didn't allow myself to dwell in depression and things like that, self-loathing and all of that stuff. During those bad situations I put myself in, I would still work a job or, take on tattoo clients, right? So I still would provide for myself in that way. I just didn't have the funds allocated at that time to pay rent for myself. And I'm going to be honest, I had an addiction to marijuana. And it really affected how I managed money at that time, I must add. And I probably was spending way more on that when I was tattooing than when I got the job working at Amazon, an Amazon fulfillment center. That's where I've been at the last 3 years. But anyway, once I retired from tattooing, because I was just burnt out, because for me, even though I had a lot of passion for it, it really was a means to an end. I really wanted to create products and things. That is what my dream was. I wanted to create products. I wanted to write music and do a lot of things. I wanted to be able to earn money in my sleep so I can spend more time with my family because I had some estranged family members and I wanted to kind of put the pieces back together. But I just couldn't find the time as a tattoo artist. And I simply wanted to fix that, right? Among other things. And my financial situation was the main way that I saw that I could get that done. Anyway, so I got the job and I began to develop better habits financially. And for a time, I stopped smoking marijuana, so I did have more money. But I still was kind of like mindlessly spending money on takeout like DoorDash and stuff like that. I was paying my rent on time and ahead of time most of the time. So I did improve there. But I had not yet gotten better with my discretionary income yet. And then something clicked in me. And I decided to focus on building my business again. And so I started using my discretionary income a lot more to invest in finishing of building the assets that I had. Because the assets that I had created, which were children activity books, I found had a lot of typos and a lot of problems in it, even though it was well received by the public, the first versions. So I had to literally pay more money to have iterations done to the books and corrections and different things like that. But it was worth it because I believed in them. I already proved it out in the marketplace. I took the approach that Dr. Myron Golden talks about. I only created what the people wanted to buy, the parents wanted to buy, the children's wanted to engage with. I only created from that perspective, getting direct feedback from the marketplace. And so it was worth making the corrections. So I did that. And then I got saved. The Lord saved me. And hey, I was not seeking the Lord at all. And he saved me. And that right there, I did a total 360. I was able to give up bad habits that I had at that point. I would just, distract myself watching inappropriate material, the kind, and for some it's not inappropriate because if you're an adult, they may feel that, okay, I can do this, I'm an adult. But for me, it was inappropriate as a man of God, right? Because God says the lust of the eyes is not of him, right? So it was a distraction for me. And that was a huge distraction for a lot of years of my life. And that also was an addiction, by the way. And even though I would invest in myself and buy a lot of books on business and learn, I was self-sabotaging because I would distract myself with these fleshly desires that I had. And I'm not going to get all spiritual on you. I'm going to keep it practical, but I'm just sharing my story. When I got saved and when I was released from the bondage of those fleshly desires, everything changed for me. My discipline went to the roof. My focus went to the roof. I stopped watching television, listening to music. And listen, I still love music and plan on watching, listening to music and things and watching movies with my family after I'm profitable. But I had a laser focus. I didn't want to do any extracurricular activities. I simply wanted to focus on developing myself and doing my business because I knew that I didn't want to work full time for another business for the rest of my life, taking more time away from my life. But I knew that that job would allow me the space to really take it serious about me focusing and building a business and buying back the rest of my life. And so, that started to happen. But I wanted to actually tell you one of the key things that made a big difference financially. As I said, at that time I was paying child support for 3 boys, and the fourth, my youngest son, was with me, so I was also responsible for providing for him as well. And if you know anything about boys at that time, he was going through the ages of 10, 11, and 12. His shoe size is he's wearing men's shoes. He now wears a man's 11 shoe, and he likes designer shoes, and I like that for him to have that. That may not make sense to some people, but I feel like he should be able to experience those things, and so I love doing that for him. Plus, he has flat feet like me, so I want to make sure he has quality shoes. So I buy him Jordan sneakers and things of that nature. And like I said, they're a man's shoe, right? And so, yes, I do sacrifice on myself and make sure that I invest in decent shoes for myself. And I make sure I have my work shoes and stuff like that, but I do that for him. And he eats like a man as well. So you can understand that financially, paying the child support for 3 boys and providing for the fourth, who's actually with me, that was challenging. But how I did it was, how I pulled it off, and having discretionary income to invest in my business, the way that I was able to do it is because I lived below my means. Now, I know this may sound redundant. You've heard me say this before, but I'm telling you, it changed my life. Becoming more financially prudent has helped me beyond measure. Counting the cost, as Jesus Christ said, learning to budget has dramatically changed things for me. it has allowed me the discretionary income to invest in my business, and which removed excuses from me and anyone else. Because you might hear a lot of people say, well, I have children, I have this, I have that. Well, some of the expenses that you have, you don't need to have them. And let's admit that. When I read the book Rich Dad Poor Dad, it talks about keeping up with the Joneses, right? Participating in a rat race. In other words, you're out here competing for the attention of others to have them think something about you. And so you may live beyond your means, get things that you can't afford, rather than investing in those liabilities to impress people. It would behoove you to invest in assets, right? Income generating assets that can actually help you buy back the rest of your life. And that's what I decided for myself. So, like I said, by the grace of God, I was saved. He released me from the bondage of those bad behaviors and bad habits that I had that actually did, affect me financially a great deal, as you can imagine. I was like spending like $400 a month on marijuana at that time when I was working. I can't even imagine how much I was spending when I was making more when I was a tattoo artist. I can't even imagine. And like I said, some people say, well, why would you retire from tattooing if it wasn't as physically challenging as working at Amazon and you made more? Well, for me, I was burnt out. Like I said, spiritually at that point, I was burnt out. Like a service-based business for me, right? And I didn't have it leveraged in a way where it was productized. And I certainly wasn't looking to like open up a shop and hiring artists or scale shops. I wasn't looking to do any of that stuff. It was a means to an end for me to eventually create products for myself. So it was like owning a job, right? Owning that service-based business as a professional tattoo artist. So instead of having one boss, I had hundreds of bosses. And that was just not fun for me. And I was burnt out from it. But I did learn valuable lessons on creativity, design, sales, marketing, lead generation. I learned all of that there. That I ran my first successful paid advertising as a tattoo artist. And I figured, okay, if I can use these evergreen principles that work for me as a tattoo artist, I can apply that to a product-based business, right? And so my mind was made up. And I love the fact that I had my own autonomy working a job, because I treated the job as a business, right? Like Amazon was a client, a customer. And it was a lot less stressful and demanding only having the one client. And as long as I was willing to get up and go and show the work and hold myself accountable, that was better for me at the time. I said, okay, I'm going to make an exit from this business because I'm going to focus on working on my own business, right? And that's just basically how I looked at the Amazon job. I said, this is going to be a means to an end. This is going to be the investment seed that I need. And that's exactly, for my case, is what I needed. I didn't have, like I said, I didn't have the cash reserves. I didn't have the credit. I literally was living paycheck to paycheck. But I began to live in a prudent manner. I became very frugal and a lot more wise than I had ever been with my finances. And it felt really good to become a reliable and trustworthy person when it comes to finances, when it comes to paying your bills on time. That felt really good for me, and I preferred that. And also, like I said, living below my means allowed me to generate the financial resources to invest in myself. And I've always done that, by the way. I can say that. Yes, I was horrible with my money, but I always did invest in myself. I always invested in books, my own tattoo equipment and things like that. It's just that I didn't have the surplus that would have took it to another level. And that's what I lacked. And at this particular point in, me being blessed and saved by the Lord and having a renewed mind when it came to discipline and finance, it just took surplus to a higher level, even though I had a lot of financial responsibility. And that showed me, okay, that means if I can do it, others can do this too. And I get it. They may want to have certain things, luxuries and stuff like that, to appear that they're living the life, instead of making a temporary financial sacrifice for those things that really aren't necessary to them so that they can invest in a lifestyle and actually live a great life on the back end, right? Observing the easy hard principle, right? That's what Dr. Myron Golden, how he says it. I'm not saying he created that, but he talks about that a lot. And I understand that. So the easy hard principle goes kind of like this. You get to choose your hard and you get to choose your easy. Everyone is going to have an easy part of their life. They're going to hard part. Usually if you do things, the hard things up front, you get to have it easy on the back end. If you settle in and do the easy things up front, a lot of times, well, most of the time, you're going to have it hard on the back end. I chose to do the hard thing up front and to live in a way that actually gave me all of the things that I needed, but I didn't have any unnecessary expenses putting pressure on me so that I could earn discretionary income with which to invest in creating income generating assets, which will then allow me to replace the income of Amazon and have more financial freedom and buy back the rest of my life so I can spend it with the people that I care about. And that's exactly how I leverage the easy hard principle through living below my means. And I understand you might want to have that vehicle and everything, but the car payments right now is a liability for you. It's just not really helping, right? You're living in a house that is a lot bigger. You don't own it. You may be paying rent, but it looks nice to your neighbors and everyone else like you're doing something. You're taking them license and things. But at the same time, if you lose that job, you're going to be in a financially challenging situation. And I want you to think about that. You know that you wanted to do this business. And even though you're finding it hard to get the loans and you don't have the credit at the time, you feel like it's going to take some time to get your credit, back in line or in good standing, or even in good standing for the first time. I'm telling you, there is a solution. The solution is simply living more frugally, living below your means, budgeting your money better, cutting out unnecessary expenses, and really using your discretionary time and income to focus in on building that business. Doing the hard thing right now up front temporarily, because time is going to pass. It may take you 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, maybe even 5, who knows? But if you're willing to do the work now, because the time is going to pass anyway, as Myron Golden says, and he's right, the time is going to pass anyway. And let me tell you this, the last 3 years, and we're about to really go into the official launch of our business. And yes, it did take time. It took work. It took dedication. It took a bunch of iterations that I had to pour money into. Yes, I did have to spend thousands of dollars and things of that nature, but it was worth it because we have gained so much momentum and we have come so far in just a 3-year period. And I bootstrapped. Like I said, guys, I didn't have a wealthy family member that can loan me money. I didn't have great credit. I didn't have any of those things. So I had to bootstrap it. I had to rearrange my life, downsize, right? Not that I was even living big to begin with, but I kept it simple, right? In a way that I could afford to pay my child support on time and in full, to provide for my son and myself in full, and pay my bills on time. And it has changed my life. It has made a big difference. And I still have discretionary time and income with which to invest in building my business in real time. I'm not waiting until I figure things out. I just dive in and figure it out along the way. And it has absolutely changed my life and made a difference. So I want you guys to take this episode and understand that if you are in a situation where you don't know where the money is going to come from, consider these things that I've discussed. Figure out how you can uniquely put this into action in your life, and then come back in 3 years and tell me how it looks. All right, guys, have a blessed one, and I hope this video was helpful.